Hello, my name is Gil Penalosa, and this is Cities for Everyone, the webinar. Every other Tuesday, I invite fascinating people from around the world to share experiences and knowledge that will help us create affordable, equitable, and sustainable cities. I was born in Bogota, Colombia, where as commissioner, I led the design and construction of over 200 parks and took a small program called Ciclovia, Open Streets, and increased it to over 120 kilometers, 75 miles of car-free streets every Sunday and holiday, where more than 1 million people walk, bike, run, shop, enjoying the presence of each other. 17 years ago, I created 880 Cities, a non-profit organization based in Toronto, Canada, where I live. Last year, I ran for mayor and came second with 100,000 votes. My aim was to change the conversation in creating a Toronto for everyone. I've been fortunate to have worked in over 350 cities in all continents, sharing and learning. Based on all experiences, I developed master classes and keynotes customized to each city. But Cities for Everyone, the webinar, is a way of giving back. It's always free and hopefully always interesting. Please invite others to join us every other Tuesday, anyone who cares about cities and people, equity and sustainability, about all living older, healthier, and happier. So thank you, everyone, from signing up today. So what I thought is this: I'm so grateful with you. I'm going to tell you a little bit about me, because some people know me, but also many people do not, and they think that I'm just the host, that I come here and I present and I interview. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about who I am, and then I'm going to go through some of the sessions I had said that maybe if we had time, we were going to do something on Copenhagen. I have that on Copenhagen for another session at another time. But today, some of the Copenhagen is going to go as I go through some of the presentations. So let me share with you a little bit about my background and why I do this and where do I see that the cities, why do I think that this is really important? When we talk about cities, I mean, we need to decide, how do we want to live? How do we want to live? As an example, if we want children to walk to school, we need to do small schools so that the catchment area is small, and then we will be able to walk. But if we do gigantic elementary schools, it's a walkable school. It becomes more of a drive-to school. So how do we want to live is we should always think about that. It doesn't matter if it's cities of 2,000 people or cities of 500,000 or 5 million or 10 million. Always, when you look at these sessions, open your mind, because it's not about copying and pasting, but you can adapt and improve. I hope that every single one will be a learning experience. So it's about cities and where anybody could walk and bike and take public transit, and also have nature close to home. I mean, the issues are similar. And when we were thinking about equity and population growth and climate change, I mean, we see the symptoms everywhere. And not only the symptoms, but we also see the consequences at the city level, at the personal level. And it's incredible that still some people don't want to believe in it. So even though I live in Canada, and this summer Canada was on fire from coast to coast to coast. So we need to decide, how do we want to live? Let me tell you a little bit about me. I started getting very involved in cities even since I was in high school. In 1976, the largest World Conference of United Nations took place in Vancouver, Canada. And I was very lucky because my father was in charge of it. He was number 2 at the United Nations, Under Secretary General, in charge of organizing. And actually, there was another Trudeau as Prime Minister. And my older brother and me, we attended that conference. He was beginning university, I was ending high school. And maybe we were impacted by Vancouver or by UN Habitat or by whatever, but afterwards, he became mayor twice in Bogota. Recently, he wrote a book that now it's in Spanish and Portuguese, and soon it's going to be in Albanian. And in English, it's coming out just in a few months. The University of Pennsylvania is doing it, Equality and the City. And in my case, I've worked in over 350 cities, so we were impacted. And not only through our father, but also our mother, landscape gardener, a teacher, an artist. So I've been thinking about people and cities and equity and sustainability for a long time. Now I live in Toronto, in Canada, for the last 24 years. But before, I was commissioner in Bogota. Bogota is the capital of Colombia, in the northern tip of South America. And I'm just going to mention a couple of things. Parks and ciclovia. Ciclovia is what in North America we call open streets. Parks, I designed and led the construction of over 200 parks all over the city, small, large, medium. This is one of the big ones. The Pope came, gave a mass for 1 million people, and then the Pope left, and there was nothing, not even sidewalks, nothing for 27 years. Why nothing for 27 years? Because change is hard. In Bogota or in Toronto or in your city, anywhere in the world, change is hard because you try to change and the cave people show up. You know, because they are everywhere. They are the citizens against virtually everything. But this is one of the reasons why I created this webinar, so that we find ways how to deal with these cave people, how to find solutions to the problem, and not problems to the solution. So it was like this for 27 years. And in 4 years, it became the nicest park for active, for passive, for contemplative recreation. And one day you can invite me and we can talk more about parks, but parks is about uses. It's not only infrastructure. It's both infrastructure, but also it's programs. Sometimes you want to be with thousands of people, so that was just with a friend. Otherwise, you just want to be by yourself, but it's about programs, it's about the uses. Parks are about people. And after I was commissioner in the following term, one of my brothers, Enrique, became mayor, and he did a library, a beautiful library, in one of the corners of that gigantic park. Actually, he built 4 libraries, in 3 of them in extremely poor areas, to dignify, and that was quite exciting. And then, but it's not about just large parks. Most of the 200 parks that I built were small parks in very poor areas. And I remember people telling me, oh, Gil, why are you doing parks when the poor people need so many things? Of course, they also need education. They also need health, but they need parks and they need recreation. When the poor people really feel miserable, it's in the, when the poor people feel miserable, it's in the leisure time. It's in the leisure time. When people are working, the owner of a corporation or the minimum wage worker have similar experiences. Maybe even the owner has more anxiety. But in the leisure time, the minimum wage worker doesn't have any options. The owner has restaurants and theaters and clubs and country clubs and travels. So the minimum wage worker doesn't. So we need, in the low-income areas, we need much better everything that is public, better sidewalks, better bikeways, better parks, better programs, better schools, and so on. So that's why so much emphasis on doing really, really nice parks in the poorest areas of the city. And they created a huge impact. And also the ciclovia. What is the ciclovia? The ciclovia is what in North America we call open streets. I found a small program with a few kilometers, a few miles, and few thousands of people, and we turned it into the world's largest pop-up park. It's something that is amazing. These two, Simón Bolívar Park and the Ciclovías, is kind of my babies. And, well, 886 is another, but this Ciclovia is simple. Open streets to people, closer to cars, and the magic happens. I was obsessed with connecting the wealthiest and the poorest people, also because I was reading about Frederick Olmsted, who was doing some of the best parks in North America. When he was doing Central Park at about in 160 years ago, he said in the New York, everybody hated everybody, the locals and the immigrants, the rich and the poor, the blacks and the whites. He said, they don't know each other. They don't live in the same buildings. The children don't go to the same schools. We need places where we meet each other as equals. And I said, well, that's what open streets can be. That's what ciclovia could be. But it was only a few kilometers and mostly in the upper income areas. So I decided to connect the richest parts of the city with the poorest part. And from a few kilometers, we ended with 121 kilometers, 75 miles, interconnecting the city and some of the main parks. By the way, in the last 20 years, it has not increased 1 meter. They add 1 kilometer, they take out 1 kilometer, but it hasn't gone. So that message is whenever you do things in your city, whenever there is a mayor or there is city staff or people that want to do it, do as much as possible, because you don't know when change happens and then it doesn't, and then it happens. So try to do as much. This is great. We get young and old and rich and poor and fat and skinny. It's really spectacular. 1 out of 5 people come out. Why do I think open street is important? Because it changes people's minds. We are reminded that the streets are public spaces. They belong to everyone. They can have different uses according to the time of the day of the week of the year. And it's something that I love. And it can be big cities like LA or New York. It's about social integration. It works in cities of 100,000, 1 million, 10 million, more. And this has been like a virus, a very positive virus coming out of Bogota. Now hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of cities do it. When I started going to India, there was now 50 cities in India are doing it. And if your city doesn't want to do it because there's no, and they say, oh, it's Bogota or India. Well, Paris does it every Sunday, 52 weeks of the year. They even do it in the wintertime. And one of the things I love is that we meet each other as equals. It's one of the few places, if not the only one, where the wealthiest people in the city meet with the poorest people of the city as equals. When that CEO of the corporation, he might meet with his minimum wage worker at work, but they know who is the CEO and who's the minimum wage worker. In the ciclovia, on the open streets, everybody's equal. Bicycles do not differentiate. You might be on a $5,000 bike or on a $50 bike, you are equal, and that is very, very powerful. I mean, do it in your city, do it everywhere. It's low cost. All you need is people and cities. So you have people and cities, do it. It's low risk. You are not doing arenas or gymnasiums, so it's no risk. And the benefits, oh my God, the benefits are amazing. It's good for mental and physical health, for economic development, for environment, for happiness. I mean, try next year in 2024. Do it and start with the first Sunday of every month. And then if it doesn't work, okay, fix it or you end it. What is the risk? Nothing. But if it does work, then do it every Sunday in 2025. And then since I've been living in Canada, I created 880 cities and cities for everyone. And I have been very fortunate to have worked in over 350 cities all over the place, learning and sharing. And I love this webinar. And in addition of the webinar, we have master classes and other things. But everywhere I go, those 350 cities, people say, Gil, what is 880 cities? Well, 880 cities is not about parks or streets or walking or cycling. Those are the means, not the end. The end is, how can we help create successful cities? And everywhere I go, I try to see the venue. Like I was working in Warsaw, Poland, and I was going to speak here. Oh, I said, how I'm going to compete? Today, these people are dancing, and the day after, I was going to be speaking. And then I saw the DJ Vika. Oh, amazing, Vika. You know, the people in the US that create the most businesses are people between 60 and 70. And the second segment is between 50 and 60. And this was Poland. She owns the music equipment and goes from park to park, organizing dances, organizing activities. But let's get back to 880. So it's about this. It's about healthy communities where people are going to live happier. And always people ask me, Gil, can my children walk to school? Can my grandparents ride their bike to get eggs or milk? I said, look, an 880 rule of common sense, but common sense seems to be the least common of the senses. Step number 1, think of a child that you love, someone around 8 years old. Maybe your son, your daughter, your grandchild, your nephew or neighbor, anybody around 8 years old. And once you have that 8-year-old in mind, step number 2, think of an 80-year-old that you also love. It can be your parents, your brothers, your teachers, former professors, anybody that is around 80. And once you have the child and the older adult, then go to step number 3. Would you send them walking or cycling to the park or walking to take public transit? Would they feel safe? If you would, it's because it's safe enough. If you would not, it's because it's not. What if everything that you did in your city, everything, the sidewalk, the crosswalk, the park, the library, the school, the business, the restaurants, the businesses, everything had to be great for an 8 and an 80-year-old? Not 8 and 80, no, 8 to 8, no, not 8 to 80, it's 8 and 80. Because 8 and 80 are indicators. Because if it's good for the 8 and it's good for the 80, it's going to be good for everybody from 0 to over 100. We must stop building cities as if everybody was 30-year-old and athletic, and men, and cities built by men. This has to change. That is the concept of 880 cities for everyone. So I think we got to look for a new future, but a new future today. We got to create cities for people. I mean, it sounds obvious, cities for people, but it's not. It's not so obvious. In the last 100 years, this is how we've been doing cities around the world, sending the poor people to the worst places, with no trees and no parks. I mean, this is the US, 3 cities in the US, but it could be in other places. By life expectancy, the zip codes in dark red, the life expectancy is 60. The zip codes in light pink is 90. How can we even accept that if you are born in one neighborhood, your life expectancy is going to be 60? If you are born 10 minutes away, you're going to have 50% more life expectancy. Your life expectancy is going to be 90. I mean, we've been focusing on car, and not on people's happiness. And this is how we've been building the cities. And even investing billions and billions on mobility. We have not even solved mobility. This is Florence, Italy, and one highway intersection at the same scale. It seems that we had learned how to do cities, and all of a sudden we unlearned. Maybe when the car arrived, we should have done corridors for people walking and cycling, and other corridors for cars. But no, we said, oh no, the car is better than the horse. It's like technology now. We should say, okay, technology is good, but if technology is for people, not if people is for technology. So since we didn't do the corridors, instead, this is a little bit what we did. Imagine all the cities in the US used to be walkable. People used to walk for bread to the school, and then all of a sudden they were split. Imagine in these cities how people used to visit friends or how they used to move. And then this happened. All the cities, it's really, I mean, the cities don't decide the what the population, but the cities do decide the how. This is how we continue. Imagine instead of trees or parks, we're doing parking lots. Imagine the children. So the reality is that in the last 40 years have not been very good, or the last 80 years. So we must build cities. When I say that in the past 50 years has not been good, it's because the cities where we live today, what we have created in the last 50 years, most is not good for physical or mental health, or the quality of the air, or the water, or climate change, or economic development. So we need to improve the cities that we have today. Also, we got to create also new cities. We need to plan cities radically different, and we need to manage them radically different. So that's why we need to change. There's not going to be a Martian coming to say, oh, I will create fun and equitable. Put the name of your city there. I mean, change is hard. I know doing the same is easy. That's why we do it. Change is not unanimous. So we need to listen, but at the end of the day, make a decision, because the cost of nothing is not nothing. These are not technical issues or financial. This is about policy. I mean, this is not about political parties. It's policy. All political parties, they should be in agreement of the what, having safe streets, having clean air, whatever. Maybe they have differences in the how, but not in the what. Everyone here needs to participate. Let's be bold. Let's develop alliances with the private, the public, the NGOs, universities, everybody, and develop a shared vision. But vision is not enough, because we have the vision and we don't act, then we become frustrated. No, we need action. And that's why I created this webinar, because I think we need passionate advocates. And that's why Cities for Everyone is. I hope that everyone, every week, every other week, when you participate, you realize that it's about acting. It's passionate. It's not just because it's interesting. It's not just because it's fun. And so I created this webinar thinking of giving back. I want to thank, especially I want to thank Paula Olavarria. Paula Olavarria is my right-hand person. She helps in so many things, and she had a little baby 2 weeks ago, so now she has even more reasons to work on this. Camila Uriona helps in communications, and my wife, Claudia, she helps with the data and things. So they help me in the operation, but this is a personal activity. It's really a love one. When I say give back, actually I get more from you than what I give, and I dream about it. When I created it, I said, if in 6 months I don't have 50 people, then I cancel. If I have between 50 and 100, I think about it. Oh my God, since the second month, we were having over 200 people. 2 weeks ago, we had about 800 people registered. We had people from 43 countries. I mean, we have people from all over the place. It's about a third from Canada, a third from the US, and a third from everywhere. I'm amazed. I pinch myself. I'm so grateful to every one of you. It's really incredible to be connected from South Africa and Greece and Belgium and Brazil. And I'm also very grateful with the guests, because every guest appears and they don't charge anything. I mean, I don't have money, and I'm assuming as a personal cost everything. I pay Zoom, I pay MailChimp, I pay everything, all of the cost and my time. So these guests, they also donate their time. Oh, Mitchell Silver, David Sim, Carlos Moreno, Brent O'Derian. I mean, every one of them. I thank them so much for this. And by the way, with all of you from the 43 countries is how I do this. I read every comment. At the end of every session, there is a survey. I read everything. And then I decide who to invite based in what you tell me on that survey, based on what you tell me, topics or people or the format. And by the way, of the people that we have had recently, when Planetism came out with the 100 most influential urbanists in the world, well, a lot of them have been guests here. I like to bring people that have knowledge, but mostly people that have been doing. So all of you, thank you. Okay, what I want to tell you is that we have this website. So when you go to gpenalosa.ca, this is what you get. This is the homepage. And then you start coming down, and there is the webinar. Here is the webinar. So all you got to do is click the webinar. And when you go to the webinar page, it's very simple. You get this big sign at the beginning: past sessions, view, and share. And also you can register for the other session. Like here we got the indigenous urbanism, community as a corporation, blah, blah, blah. But if you click here, past sessions, view, and share, then you are going to get all of the sessions. So it's going to be very simple. You get all of the sessions here. You click any session, and then you look at some of these sessions. But I'm going to review, I'm going to go over, I'm going to summarize some of them now. For example, this one from Brent O'Derian, we have over 1,000, 1,300 people have seen that one, or the ones from Vision Zero. Soft City, that is the last one that I'm going to touch on to it, has over 1,700 people have seen it. So this was the first one from Mitchell Silver. He was on his last week as commissioner of parks of the city of New York. And he was so kind that with all the issues, he came and he started talking about disruptions to awakening, planning for people. And basically, one of his clear messages was diversity, equity, and inclusion. And then how they are not the same. And his concern when he became commissioner in New York, it was about equity. And he said, what is equity? There are so many definitions, but he defined as fairness. And then he said, okay, New York in the last 20 years had invested billions of dollars improving the parks. But most of it was only like on 30% of the parks. Like 70% of the parks had not had any improvement. So he said, that's not fair. That's not fair. So then he redid a whole plan for his time as commissioner around fairness. And then he said, also, sometimes you're looking at the maps and it says like the walkable score and things says, oh, there is a park. He said, this is not a park. Is this a parking lot or a park? This is a park, and this is how they were trained. So this is how he was investing. He was so amazed that sometimes, even when these parks would open for the first time, some children would stay outside, and they once he went out and asked a child, why don't you come in? And he said, oh, how much do I have to pay? He saw that it was so nice that it probably had to pay something. So this is what on the walkable scores comes out as a park, but obviously it's not. Then this is a park, and this is the kind of things and the magical moment, how you can transform communities, and how come this is not fair. This is fair. And so in any of your cities, please have that very clear message from Mitchell Silver. And to be free, also to have access. Everybody should have access within a short walk. You should not have to travel the city to find access to a good park. We need to have parks. Everybody should have a park within walking distance. Look at this. In New York, the parks are 14% of the area, and the streets are 26%. The streets are almost double. So all of that is public realm. So that's why they were also thinking of things. Most of the parks were closed with fences. He started taking fences out, creating something that is parks without borders, putting lights, putting benches, putting nice benches where people are facing each other, and then opening the streets. And that was one of the things that he was very, and during COVID, how the parks improved our mental health, how we realized that parks and nature were not only good for physical health, but also to heal for mental health, and how to reimagine our healthcare and thinking about it. Let me take you through another one. Rob Adams, the chief architect of Melbourne, Australia, he spoke about gray to green. And then he also did one on the 7.5% city. Rob was so kind because 11 a.m. Toronto is 2 a.m. Melbourne. So, but nevertheless, he showed how Melbourne is taking pavement, streets, pavement, and moving from gray to green. And how, for example, all these laneways that were dark and horrible have now become people places, not one or two. They have done 84 of those laneways. And how Melbourne 30 years ago, when he began working with Melbourne, he has led the transformation of Melbourne in 30 years. Melbourne would not have been in the top 300 cities in the world. Today it's in the top 5 in any ranking. One of them was putting art all over the place. They changed the sidewalks, putting up a special rock that there's a lot of it in the province of Victoria around, and trees. Look at all those trees on the left without any trees, same place with trees, and how different it is. And now the trees in Melbourne have been able to lower the temperature like 7 degrees. In some areas have gone more than 10 degrees because of the shade. And in Melbourne, during the summertime, you get 40 degrees. You get 115, 120 Fahrenheit. So trees is something that is very, very critical. Look, some of the streets that were only for cars became only for public transit and walking. No one really wanted to leave, but also measurement. He showed how measuring the amount of people that used to walk by before it became pedestrian and the amount of people after, so that if any businesses were going to be complaining, you could say, oh, you cannot complain because we have brought you many more people. And this is the gray to green. Look, without even eliminating the cars in most of these, just reducing. Some streets are way overbuilt. So you narrow the lane, so you take out one lane, and how from 500 square meters, you go to almost 5,000 square meters. Or how along these areas, you continue to change. And instead of cars, you have trees, and you have people, even where the tram is going, putting green. So also whenever you have, this is very, very hot. And he was showing how more people are dying because of heat wave than even in the fires. And people, there is so much emphasis on the fire, but the heat sometimes is even worse. So he went through the strategies such as increasing the tree canopy, the forest diversity, and so on. You can go through it. Something nice, they did an inventory of every single tree in Melbourne. So now you can go to the website, and every tree has a small tag, and you can write emails. People said, what? Who's going to write an email to a tree? Thousands and thousands and thousands and they got students that need to do community hours, and they reply. So you write to a tree and say, oh, I'm having this afternoon reading a book. You are so magnificent. Who are you, tree? And then you get an email back, and the tree tells you what kind of tree, how old, how many years left, and so on, blah, blah, blah. And there is a dialogue, and there is thousands and thousands of emails people develop. I love, and this is how Melbourne was growing, completely sprawl, and they said, no, we cannot continue to sprawl. We need to stop. There is nothing that is worse than sprawl for climate change, for mental health, for everything. So they said, what if we densify? And then he said, if we're going to go metropolitan area, Melbourne is only about 600,000, but metropolitan area is 5 million. They're going to go to 10 million. How to grow, double the population in the existing footprint? So they said, where are we going to have public transit? Let's densify where we're going to have public transit. Not everything in between. The houses in between, to be environmentally, they're putting trees and also solar panels in the roof, whatever. But the density is wherever they have buses. If they have buses or bus rapid transit, and how are they doing? Instead of 2 floors, put in 6 or 7. And they can double the population. They can double the population from 5 to 10 million only by densifying, by allowing as of right that all of the 2 stories that are like this, we turn like this. And they can double the population. So it's not about, 40-story buildings, 80-story buildings. No, with small ones, they can double the population. You get the same density if you have 5 or 6 stories next to each other than if you have 50 stories every other block. But sometimes people think the only way to get density is through some gigantic buildings. I mean, we need density because with density, eventually everything is going to work. Sprawl, nothing will work. That's why the 7.5. Also, he's saying they're going to save $500 billion over the next 50 years because when imagine 400 homes in buildings of 5 stories in a few blocks, or the same 400 in houses, bringing the sidewalk and the street and the water and the sewage and the electricity and all of that. So that's why he says the challenge is to ensure that post-COVID it will be built better. A few weeks ago, we saw tactical urbanism. Mike Lydon, who has street plans. Why is tactical urbanism so important? Because at a low cost, you can show the NIMBYs and you can show decision makers how streets can be transformed. So when you find people in your city like this, they don't want change, the cave people, the citizens against virtually everything, then you use tactical urbanism. An approach to community building using short-term, low-cost, and scalable projects intended to eventually be long-term change. So when people are very much against, you can even do it just by pylons, the one on the left, demonstration. You do it in a day, or you do a pilot, or you do a temporary design for 6 months, for a year, and then you invest the money. But don't stay only up to the temporary design, because sometimes they do design for 6 months or for a year, and once they like it, they leave it, but it's very poor quality, and they don't put the money to make it permanent. No, remember that tactical urbanism is short term. Once you realize that it works, make it permanent. Also invite the community. When the community participate in doing the painting, in doing the design, in having the conversations, then they really get involved. He showed how, for example, in New Zealand, when they had a huge earthquake, how in very short time they brought these gigantic containers and they created neighborhoods out of that. And also how to show what a protected bike lane is, with very little money, very fast, and then people can see what it can look like. So this is something that is really, really important, tactical urbanism. It used to be done by guerrilla urbanists that they went and did it in the middle of the night. No, now most of the cities are looking forward to being able to show the citizens what it is they are talking about. Sometimes it's very hard to understand what a project is just from looking at these drawings. But once you put it on the ground, then you say, oh, and then it works. And then you're able to measure if it works, if it doesn't work, and how to put it in. So try to do things, try to show really, really, really fast, and then it works. We had a session on trees and parks where we had Nadine Gallet, who is a PhD from MIT, and Dr. Cecil Conningen, who used to be the head of urban forestry in Vancouver. He taught something about the rule of the 330-300. What is the 330-300? Is forget about measurement citywide. They tell you, oh, Toronto has 28% tree canopy. Yeah, but that's the citywide. The wealthy neighbors have over 50%, the low income less than 10%. So if I have only 5%, what do I care that the city has 28% average? So this is for you. From anywhere in your city, you look out your window, you should be able to look at least 3 healthy trees. Within, you go outside and 30% of the tree canopy in your neighborhood, in your street. And within 300 meters, you should find, or 3 blocks, you should find as a quality green space or park. So it's 300. Then you can realize, oh, we might have a lot of trees, but not in my street, not in my neighborhood. So that is the 300. 3 trees from anywhere, 30% tree canopy, and 300. And Dr. Nadine Gallet, Nadine is amazing. She has a podcast called Internet of Nature, and that's what she presented. She was showing how, through technology, through internet, we can start doing a lot of things. For example, measurement the soil. We can know how much water it has, how much water it needs, how often it needs to be irrigated. What is the difference if you put the water in the daytime or at nighttime? What do you need to do in the summer, in the winter, and so on? And the dose. Also, she showed how we have detectors. Now we know that it's healthier to walk if we're near nature. So when we are walking, are we walking indoors? When we're going to do 10,000 steps, if they are indoors or outdoors, and if we are outdoors, if we're close to nature. So that's something that is really interesting. Also, they're using drones to have to be able to measure the trees, what kind of tree, how many trees, what are the ages, and so on, to be proper. Well, we had my friend Yangel. I mean, all of them are my friends, and I really thank him for accepting to go. And when Yang came, he talked a lot about the difference between sidewalks and plazas and parks as trees, because he was thinking a lot about the need of making the everyday life a city for people. He spoke a lot about the density, the height of the buildings, and how much can you see from the different areas, and why when his wife is a psychologist, so he studies a lot about the psychology of and how in the buildings around 6-7 floors, anything under 10 floors, there's a lot more contact. When you can see and hear and even smell what's going on in the streets. He says that when you go over 10 floors, you start having more in common with birds and planes than with people. I remember when I was running for mayor and said that, and people were so upset with me, the people that live in buildings or the people that want gigantic buildings. I was in Senate. One of my mentors, Gil, was Senate, and actually I agree. When you're in the low buildings, you get contact with what is going on in the neighborhoods. In Park X, we had a wonderful from Dr. Lem. She told us about how doctors are prescribing because it's good for nature. They said if they tell you go take a walk, people don't take the walk. But if they give you a prescription, and now many doctors across Canada are prescribing so many minutes in nature, in walking, and then people are doing it and they're realizing that in many cases it replaces medicine. So it's good for attention deficit disorder and for mild cases of depression and anxiety. And we were with Fred Kent, who created the project for public spaces, and she said, oh, we have to turn everything upside down to get it right side up, to get from inadequate to extraordinary. I've done work with Fred in Chicago, in Mexico, in Poland, in so many places. Sidewalks is the key to creating anything. So how are we going to do? I think that sidewalk, for example, he was showing these images. You put a bank in a street corner and it's a disaster because there is no life after 3 p.m. There is no life Saturdays or Sundays. That's why Amanda Burton, the commissioner of planning in New York, said no more banks in street corners. And so put banks on the second floors. You don't need, bank is not an impulse decision. So you can have a Fred show. This is my favorite bench in the world. You got 5 groups of people doing 5 different activities and no one cares what the others are doing. And about how the social life really has to be for everyone, for people of all ages, and all abilities and all backgrounds. And he was saying, these people have had a good life when they're there. And then we had a wonderful session with Brent Toderian, density versus nature, because people say, oh, you got to have density or you got to have nature. And he said, no, that's a false choice. You must have density and nature. Otherwise it will not work. And he showed multiple cases where the cities are green. And then he said, green is not only trees. Green is if there is less pavement, less asphalt, less concrete on the sidewalks. If taller buildings take up a lot, are never as good for climate change. Buildings up to 12 stories, they can be in wood, so much more environmentally friendly. And he spoke a lot about density done well. When the buildings reduce the energy, where people walk, where people bike, where people can actually get to places. And he shows some of the development. He was chief planner of Vancouver. Now he has his own firm, Toderian Urban Works, and he provides the environmental practices and how the building itself can get water going through. But he said the priorities, the hierarchy, it cannot be just blah, blah, blah. Top priority, people walking and cycling and public transit and cars at the bottom. And he showed about what a protected bike lanes are. I'm going very fast because I got only 10 minutes. But for example, the temperatures. When you got trees, you can have temperatures substantially lower. And with climate change, the summers are getting much warmer everywhere, whether you are in the summer hemisphere in Australia or you are in the northern one here in Canada, everywhere. And the trees, so not only they look beautiful, but also they lower the temperatures. When you get the gigantic storms, they absorb water. I mean, the benefits are incredible, multiple. So he really wants that for us to think about density done well. And Leah Schaum, I met her when she was head of, in San Francisco, of this Bicycle Coalition. She went to Sweden where Vision Zero was created and studied for a full year, lots of cities that are doing, what are they doing? And he came back and created Vision Zero Network. In the US, over 46,000 people are killed every year, and it's preventable. I mean, do we want this couple to walk all the way there and come back with a little kid when the bus stop is right in the middle? And she spoke about this is what happens in many cities about Vision Zero. What if we don't change at all and something magical happens? Nothing magical happens. Nothing happens. We need to make it happen. We need to fix it. I mean, we know, for example, in Toronto, we know the 100 most dangerous intersections in the city. They are the same 25 years ago, 20 years ago, 15 years. Why have they not been fixed? And that is in every city. I mean, I love Toronto. I just mentioned that is because as an example, but if you go to your cities, it's the same intersection. This is really a matter of life or death. And she spoke especially about the speeds. And very close to this, we saw examples of Seattle and Oakland. This one, I love it, Hoboken. Why Hoboken? Because Hoboken got Vision Zero and put it into practice. This is right next to Manhattan. New York is on the other side of the river. So it's not Oslo. Oslo also has Vision Zero. But look at Hoboken, some of the things that they did. They went to zero. In the last 4 years, 0 people dying in traffic incidents. No one in cars. We also don't want people in cars dying. No one in cars, walking or cycling or taking public transit. They put it, this is the mayor, everything is 20 miles an hour. 20 is this miles is the same as 30 kilometers an hour. And it's not because 20 is plenty sounds nice. No, it's because we save lives. If you get hit by a driver at 20 miles an hour, there is 5% probability of dying. At 40 miles or at 50 kilometers is over 80%. So Hoboken is really a wonderful example of, in North America, how it got done, how they made it citywide 20 miles an hour. And Cities for People, Hele Holt, who's the co-founder. Hele and young Gil created Gil Architects. And then she presented on the Gil approach through analysis and engagement, and then how to have the children, how to measure the quality of the air, measure the levels of physical activity. So going from the big data citywide to the live data measuring how long are people on the streets, when they sit on benches, for how long do they stay, at what time, what's it like in the weekdays, what's it like at the weeknights. She invited me. I was for 12 years one of the strategic advisors of Gil. Amazing. And my friend Carlos Moreno, another Colombian living abroad, he's living in Paris. He created the 15-minute city. And I think that 15-minute city, some people say, oh, it's just about having everything within walking distance. Yeah, the grocery store, the school, the park, the faith areas, the restaurants, friends, and so on. But it's much more than that. It's not only you. You go to a coffee shop, but it's also for the barista doing the coffee shop. They also need to live in that neighborhood. Everybody needs to live. It's about proximity. It's about proximity. And now the connection, the World Urban Health is talking about the 15-minute city, but also climate change. What Carlos Moreno is talking also is about proximity. It's about equity, so that anybody, anywhere in the cities can actually have most of their basic needs within walking distance. Part of it is having sustainable buildings. The most sustainable building is the one that you don't build, if you don't build it. And then so it's about how to use existing infrastructure in multiple uses. That is what he calls the neighborhoods. The schools in the neighborhood, the school should be the capital of a neighborhood. The capital is the hub, is where everything happens. From 7 a.m. till 4 p.m. is only for the school. But in the evenings, it's for the community, for Saturdays, Sundays, on holidays, in the summer. So the public schools, every neighborhood has a public school. Let's make it the capital of that neighborhood. Let's open it up. Let's make the community hub. Then it's going to help us have that. Also the schools, for example, he was saying in Paris, over 200 schools do not have cars in front of the school during the school time. And the participatory budget and the conversion, everything to be sustainable, everything that we have built has to have multiple uses, including the streets. And this is the last one, the soft city. By the way, David Simmons Soft City, this is the session that has had the most viewers. By the way, in all, when you go to gpenalosa.ca and you see it, these viewers, it's only their presentations. It doesn't have our dialogue. Our dialogue is because it's you and me. It's very personal. We talk about things, and that's where I get the ideas, who to invite next, what other programs, how to develop. So it's a personal conversation that you and I have every other week. So that's not on the recordings. On the recordings is the presentation. I also ask my guests, because sometimes you hear webinar and people just go to webinars and that's just talk, blah, 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 blah. No, I ask my guests, please, you need to do a 25-minute presentation. You need to use many, many images, because you, my participants, keep telling me that you love the images because an image is worth 1,000 words. So then, for example, David Sim, this is the #1, and this is his book, Soft City. Now it's like in 10 different languages. It's great. He showed Malmo. He said, look, the Swedish, you tend to think that Swedish are cold, and look at this. You create a nice ambience, and even in a cold day, they got jackets and things. They go out and dance. And he says, people think soft. Yeah, soft is having the programs, the activities, the connectivity. When you have, he talks also about height. When you got 5 or 6 story buildings, there are eyes on the street, like Jane Jacobs used to say. You see people and you want to go out, you want to be with them. And he said, this is exactly what we don't need. Our friend Yangel took that photo. This is about having fresh air and exercise and meeting people. And he said, everybody says if we walk, we're going to cut breast cancer risk. And that's the way, dementia. We're going to be able, if we socialize. So when we start thinking physical activity, walking and socializing, it's about the built environment. So he talks about the built environment, place, the living locally is what, and then he goes to what Carlos Moreno was saying about the proximity, accommodating people there are different ways, but we need to eliminate those neighborhoods that have single family housing. Toronto used to have 80% of the area for single family housing. Fortunately, this year that changed. And it has to change everywhere. And in the same places, wherever we live, there has to be multiple activities. At the street level, it has to be retail, the coffee shop, the ice cream place, the place to do yoga, to do pottery, to do knitting, all of those magnificent things that Amazon cannot deliver, fortunately. So it's where we meet people, where we socialize, we're going to be happy. I mean, in the 5, 6 story buildings, a child sees their friend is outside playing. Oh, in 45 seconds, they are downstairs and they are playing with them. And so it's about that. And he says, look, we sleep about 1/3 of our life, of our daily, or our 24 hours. We work about 1/3. So how are we going to split? So that's why it's so important, the 15-minute city, and what he's saying is so important, the local, because if we spend less time traveling, we're going to have more of our time to do whatever we want. And then he says, some people are focused on this transit-oriented development. Wherever there is a subway station, put 50 stories. He said, no, more than transit-oriented development, let's have neighborhood-oriented transit. So yes, we have the stations, but we create a neighborhood. It's not just creating gigantic towers with gigantic parking lots on the bottom so that people come down for the 40th floor directly to the basement, to the parking lot, and get out on a car. No, we need this to create neighborhoods, everything that is happening within walking distance. And we got to think of that climate change and how are we going to have cities that are good, the 4 seasons. This is not that is nice for the summer, but how it can be. And he showed about how to deliver density. For example, you can do it in your house with Lego. Get your Lego forms. These are the same amount of Legos. 4 different options of density with the same amount of units. And it doesn't have to be boring like this. It can be more interesting like this. So these were some of the examples that he was showing that it can happen. He says, think smaller. Think is where you live. Think proximity. So please share all of these recordings for you to share with decision makers. Share with decision makers, with advocates, with friends, with colleagues in the university. Share it with the students. Share it with groups. That's why we do it. So I really wanna say thank you. Thank you. This has been amazing 50 sessions. Not in my wildest dream I thought I was going to having people from 30, 40 countries connected every other Tuesday, and that we were going to have conversations on how to create cities healthier and happier, more equitable, more sustainable. So thank you very much for having accepted my invitation to join these sessions. And now I'm going to read everything that you wrote on the chat. And there is a survey. Please fill out the survey and tell us how to move forward. From the bottom of my heart, I thought I was giving back. No, I was getting back. I get so much more from you than when I give to you. So I'm truly grateful. Thank you. And I'll see you in 2 weeks.